Fairground and theme park workers of Reddit, what is the biggest malfunction that went unnoticed by the public? I worked at a water park. Anytime the wave pool or a slide got shut down to adjust chemical levels or whatever, it was most likely because a kid took a shit in it. Happens all the time. I used to work at a water park also. It wasn't always shit in the wave pool. Sometimes it was tampons or used condoms. One time we found a lot of blood and tissue floating around. Miscarriage maybe? I worked at a certain amusement park in Ohio that was considered America's roller coaster in 2005. That summer, the transformer generator of a particularly wicked roller coaster of a cyclonic nature blew. And we had to literally pull people back into the station with a rope tied to the car. And about 20 people. Instead of completely replacing it, they just worked at making it usable for the rest of the summer. And throughout the rest of the year, we would have the right go into emergency shutdown mode at random times. We were told just to try turning it off and on again until the code cleared. Without any inspections or anything like that. I worked at a small amusement park one summer. As someone else said, the biggest issues weren't the rides themselves but kids' parents not following the rules. We had one ride, I think it might be called the paratrooper, and parents would constantly try to get their kids on the ride despite the height requirements. The only protection from falling out of that ride was a lap bar. And sometimes kids would wriggle their way pretty far under that. I wasn't working. But apparently one time a kid actually got all the way under and was holding on to the bar for dear life until the worker managed to stop the ride. Cleanup at the park was pretty disgusting. We'd pretty much just throw water on the blood vomit until it was rinsed away. Maybe we used bleach water for the blood. I can't remember. No gloves or anything for cleanup. Then we wouldn't let anyone sit in that car for the rest of the day. But as far as I knew, they didn't do a more thorough cleaning at any point. Someone puked on the Sea Dragon. Maintenance didn't show up so they just ran the ride until it went away and then they let people back on. I worked at Disney World for a little while and most of the major malfunctions Disney either fixed or shut the ride down quickly. The biggest one, that I think is still there today, is the Yeti in Expedition Everest. It's a huge mammoth machine that's supposed to swing down at the riders. But it broke a while ago. The problem is to fix the Yeti would require some major work so they just left it as is and put strobe lights on it. I don't know if they fixed it recently but for years it didn't work. As I said, Disney tended to fix ride errors quickly. Like during spring break when some idiot jumped off the log on Splash Mountain and pried Brer Bear's club off the floor and dropped it in the flume. Ride was shut down real quick. I'm having my sister tell me some stories. Since she's worked at Disney World, Universal Studios, and SeaWorld. At SeaWorld she was a camp counselor over a summer. Her kids one week were 2nd and 3rd graders and she was taking them down to the dolphin area to watch them. Just so happens that at that time there was a dolphin orgy. Just 30 dolphins in one big bowl going at it. They went up to go feed them and since they were all so busy, only one fat dolphin came up to eat while occasionally you would see some tails come up and splash. Worked at Disneyland's California Adventure in my youth. I can't talk about minor parks and carnivals. But Disney does not duck around with safety. Checks by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Association, would do routine checks on everything. Plus safety checks before and after operation. One time, I jokingly told a co-worker to emergency stop the ride because we're told to never restop a ride unless you see severe structural failure. Well, he did it. The complete ride came screeching to halt. Indoor ride. No loops or anything. And, well, let's say that everyone was obviously trained and prepared for these kinds of situations. However, be aware that whatever seat you're sitting in, someone has pissed in it. And I'm not talking a couple drops either. I worked at a theme park for a couple of years. One of the best malfunctions I can remember was actual damage to the ride discovered by the maintenance guy. This was a wooden roller coaster that covered quite a bit of land area. As part of the maintenance duties, they would check the concrete footers for the many structural beams. I was operating the ride and the maintenance guy told me he would be inside the ride perimeter conducting checks. Not even 2 minutes later I see him running to the maintenance shed as the ride is going up the lift. Then the phone rang. It was maintenance telling me to stop the ride. I did so without hesitation as the ride neared the top of the first lift hill. We had to extract everyone from the ride. After everyone was off the ride and we cleared the lines, I was informed that several of the concrete footers were cracked. The ride was shut down for several days and I had to deal with many angry customers. I'm a ride operator at one of the big theme parks. Unless you're actually in the ride during a malfunction, you're not going to be aware. Due to the nature of our ride, it doesn't matter if one vehicle goes down. We just put them on one that works. Now if the entire ride goes down, the wait time will be bumped up to steer folks away. Like someone else said, the tech crew can fix most malfunctions in about 10 minutes. The rides are all incredibly safe. If you get hurt on a ride, chances are that it was your fault. Story 1. I didn't work there. But back in the late 90s, there was a theme park in Tulsa called Bells. One of the roller coasters had an accident that hurt a lot of people. As it was inclining up the chain on the first hill, it lost its grip and skyrocketed backwards into the car behind it. Luckily, it wasn't too bad, but it was enough to shut it down. Story 2. Also in Tulsa, at Celebration Station in late 90s, a worker died when they were dragged under a ride. It was a 8-10 person ship that went back and forth, eventually going upside down. Worker potatoed out and put a hand in middle, and got sucked in. Edit, someone did die in story 1. SAUOQX Chaser for reminding me. I worked for Six Flags over Texas, and while not a malfunction, most people don't know about the employees that would ride the shockwave without seat belts and standing up. The reverse G-force would hold you in your seat as long as you sat back down after the 2 loops. One female employee decided to be brave and try to do it through the whole thing. She was ejected out of the ride after the loops at the Little Hump, a small hill that pushes you away from the seat with a negative G-force. She fell and was saved by her face hitting a guy wide before hitting the ground. One time a motorcycle from the Batman Stunt Spectacular jumped a ramp and hit a female performer during a rehearsal run. That's all I know. Oh. And that time the tube flipped on the roaring rapids. It made the news. And the chick dying on the Texas Giant. It made the news too. Another former Disney cast member here. As others have said, safety is number 1 with our rides. In fact, the worst malfunction I experienced on my ride was a seatbelt fault. Basically, the ride couldn't tell that a seat was buckled, so we couldn't launch the ride until it was cleared. We had to get a maintenance CM in to clear it before starting the ride. However, I guess the biggest unnoticed thing I experienced was a gone threat. There was a rather large piece of luggage left unattended by our ride, so we formed a human barrier around the area to keep guests from walking near it in case it was dangerous. Some people were a little annoyed that we were blocking their path, but otherwise they didn't question it. After it was cleared by security and taken to Lost and Found, we just went back to work like nothing happened. I was a ride operator at a smaller theme park for several years. The rides that had the most accidents were the ones that you would not expect. The top 3 rides for accidents in our park in order were the carousel, the go-karts and the raft ride. I can definitely imagine the go-kart. But what happened on the carousel that hurt so many people? Did the horse break itself loose from the pole and ran around the whole ducking park, stomping over anyone that got in its way? Really? As long as you listen to the ride operators, everything will be fine. And if something goes wrong, just remain calm and listen to the ride operators. Especially if the place is some big name famous, That is Cedar Point, Mall of America, Six Flags, etc. The right operators will know what to do. Shit happens when people decide I've paid money so I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want. This is the fastest ticket to getting kicked out and getting your season pass revoked. Oh, and did I mention? At least in Ohio, and I'm pretty sure in other states as well, not obeying the instructions of a ride operator and or written instructions is a misdemeanor. Source: former ride operator. I used to work as a lifeguard at a smaller water park, and it had one of those rides where there's a countdown before the bottom drops out. Something like this. What we found out from ride testing the rides every morning is that if you turned the key on, then off, then on again, the bottom would drop out without a countdown. We would almost always do the silent count whenever we were ride testing because it was more exhilarating not knowing exactly when the bottom would fall out and you would drop. However, we would also use the silent count for drops whenever a kid was being a little shit. Hearing them yell in surprise was always pretty satisfying. Not really a ride malfunction, but still a malfunction nonetheless. I worked at Islands of Adventure when I was younger, and a lady ignored the sign on the penny crushing machine in the Spider-Man store that read out of order. She put her change in, and being that the machine was out of order, it did nothing. She saw me working the register and proceeded to storm up to me and bitch that the machine ate her change. I looked over and asked if the out of order sign was still on it since I had placed it there maybe 30 minutes prior. She said yes and proceeded to itch at me some more because I couldn't refund her. I have no way of opening the machine and I'm not going to short my register. Eventually, I got sick of her moaning and proceeded to take $1 out of my pocket and slam it on the counter with a "Here lady," and then walked away to go on break. Later that same day, our managers were investigating who had pissed this lady off enough to go to the front gate and bitch about the penny machine and the employee. Luckily, I would wear other employees' name tags for such reasons. They never did find out who Sergio from Micronesia was. I really hated the guests at that place. Most of my co-workers were awesome. Only job I've ever walked out on. I went to Disney World when I was 8 and Snow White Awesome Princess was standing up against the wall taking photos. I somehow glanced behind her and saw that her dress was ripped, like her ass was completely out. She was wearing a white thong, and she was taking pictures like nothing was happening. I was 8, so I had no sexual thoughts. All I thought was you. Yikes. Edit. Actually, now that I think about it, the fact that she was being so relaxed chill while her ass and thong were exposed is pretty hot. Even the contrast between seeing a woman who's made up like a Disney princess and seeing her bare ass in a thong is hot itself. Not really a ride malfunction as much as it was a wardrobe malfunction caused by the ride. But when I was in the 8th grade, we went on one of those end of the year class trips and we went to local water park. I went down one of the water slide and landed in the pool at the bottom. Well, we had this exchange student girl from Germany or something and she went down after me. Well, when she landed in the pool she got spun around somehow and her top came off. I was too in shock of seeing Bobs for the first time to say anything for a few seconds. So I kinda just stood there for a bit. I motioned to her to check her top and she looked down, fixed it, turned a super bright shade of red, got out of the water, and didn't talk to anyone for the rest of the trip. I felt real bad for her. But a few days later, while we were signing each other's yearbooks, she thanked me for motioning for her to check her top rather than saying out loud, "Hey, your bobs are showing." TLDR. Saw boobies. Told girl her top was off in a way that didn't alert the rest of the pool. Worked at an amusement park with a roller coaster that was enclosed in a future part of the land, and the ride was shaped like a hill or some other type of large natural structure. There is a reason you can be too tall for a ride. I think it's 6'4" or 6'2", and to keep your arms and legs at all time. The person was on the ride and had his hands straight up. Typical roller coaster form. His finger hit one of the metal rafters and a bolt in the rafter caught his wedding ring. This flayed his skin right off his finger. The mouse in charge does a very good job hiding these type of accidents for both bad publicity and OSHA fine statistics. Needless to say, I don't raise my hands to the sky when I'm on a roller coaster. I worked as an EMT in an amusement park one summer. We had a log flume ride that, if for whatever reason did not pull people up over the second hill, the flume would submerge if it was hit from behind by another flume coming down the ride. We had a specific code over the radio for it. And if we heard it, we were to drop everything, haul us to the ride, throw a board over the channel and start hauling people out. Thankfully never happened that summer. But someone died last time it happened 10 years prior. This sounds like a ride built on Roller Coaster Tycoon. I worked at a local theme park in my late teens. And we had a sky coaster type thing, which is basically a large 180-foot to large type structure with 2 cables hanging from the sides at the top. And from 1-3 people in a sleeping bag type thing. You get raised up to the top, pull the release cord, free fall for like 80 feet. Then swing back and forth for a bit. It was a blast and a huge attraction. One day this couple went up and left their 5-year-old daughter on the ground to watch. They got to the top and released. After the free fall they started to swing back up. And a seagull decided to fly towards the cable. The cable won and sliced off the wing to the seagull. Blood rained down on the poor little girl waiting on the ground, and the seagull spiraled and landed in the bushes a few feet from her. For some reason she started screaming and the people nearby started to panic. It was an interesting 20 minutes. I worked at a large theme park chain located in central NJ for a few years during high school and college. The rides are probably the safest in the world in terms of mechanical reliability. The only accidents that occur are when someone is playing around the ride or they have some heart defect that is triggered by the ride. Rides are inspected by the state. And NJ has some of the toughest regulations in the country. All rides are designed to come to a controlled stop in the event of any malfunction. Rides are inspected by multiple teams of people every day. The only time I've ever seen riders get hurt are when they don't follow the rules. There's a reason you should wait for the ride to stop moving before you try to get off. But people can't be bothered to read signs when they're at a theme park. So we end up having to yell at everyone anyway. Ask me if you have more specific questions. TLDR. Rides almost never break. People hurt themselves. A ride next to the one I was working at held a mechanic. Apparently he was inspecting the tracks while the ride was still being operated. They suspected an attempted suicide from his friend's reports on his behavior. It was an old wooden coaster and it crushed his head into the tracks. It was supposed to be impossible to get in without the ride being shut down first. But somehow the safety lock was not working that day. I worked at Cedar Point for a summer. Lots of stuff happened. One off of the top of my head. As the Millennium Force roller coaster was just reaching the cusp of the large hill climb, something broke. I forget what it was. But basically the only replacement part that was available was in Germany. And the part was huge and hard to package ship. They basically had to bring in an emergency crew to get people out of the coaster one at a time. Took several hours to get everyone down. But yeah. If you want a lot of crazy stories, work at a theme park for a summer. Lots of things go on. And even more behind the scenes.